Welcome to the February Ohio ISP Gathering supporting SSAs and QIDPs. I'm Kelly Fehrenbaugh, and joining me is Mandy Brooks. Thanks for listening.
We switched things up a bit for the gathering starting in January. We had a recorded session available to watch and then held office hours to join others in your region to discuss what was reviewed and any questions you had. During the recorded session, we reviewed two more assessment sections, Daily Life and Employment and Community Living. Our goal continues to be increasing comfort and familiarity with the Ohio ISP assessment questions, as well as reviewing any trending topics that may pertain to those assessment sections. In January, the trending topics we discussed were personal funds and daily life and employment. If you missed this recording or any other previous gatherings, you can find them on the Ohio ISP webpage under Resources and Documents. Ultimately, our goal is to continue to support QIDPs and SSAs to build confidence, competence, and make connections. This gathering will continue to address many of the same general objectives from past sessions, while also continuing our journey through the assessment. We will review the final assessment section, Healthy Living, using our example of Rose. We will also address the trending topics of medication administration and technology. Please note, throughout the example provided on the upcoming slides, you will find that some of the information is highlighted. This highlighted information is to draw attention to areas throughout the Ohio ISP in which technology can be explored. With the current climate, it is more important than ever to look at how technology can assist those served and reduce the reliance on paid supports. We will discuss further as we proceed. In addition, we will take the bridge from assessment to planning using our example of Rose to show how the assessment drives planning.
We are wrapping up our deep dive into the Ohio ISP assessment by reviewing the final section, Healthy Living. This section is longer than others as it covers all areas of healthy living, such as diagnoses, allergies, medical and dental care, medications and how someone takes their medications, nutrition and wellness. Remember, this section should be used in an individualized way. You only complete what applies to each person's current situation. So if that person lives at home and they share with you that their family has all of this area covered, you may just answer a couple of questions or not at all. If the person receives a lot of support and has significant needs, you'll likely spend more time here and be completing a lot more questions. Don't forget to check out the follow-up questions in italics, as those cover a lot of additional aspects of the main bolded question. We've been looking at one example of how the Ohio ISP can be completed with someone. Remember, there are additional examples on our website to show a variety of ways the Ohio ISP may be customized for each person. We'll continue to add more examples as we move forward with Ohio ISP. Here we are in the first subsection of Healthy Living, medical and dental care. Taking a closer look at the first bold question and the follow-up italicized questions, this is all basic information the team needs to know about the person. As we've discussed before, there may be a lot to call out here. It's also likely that information you learn in this question needs to make its way into planning so we can be sure the person gets the services and supports they need to have the healthiest life they can. We'll get to that when we get to the bridge from assessment to planning. Looking at Rose's example, I'm already seeing some information that we'll definitely want to carry over into important for and maybe a risk or service and support. Any guesses? It seems like it's important for Rose to stay hydrated and drink enough water. It also seems like we would want to be sure her provider knew to provide this support by helping her get in at least 8 glasses of water a day so she doesn't become constipated and uncomfortable. So moving on, Does the person ever go see a dentist or doctor? This is a great place to call out what Rose needs help with before, during, and after any appointments. Also, you may learn about specific medical professionals that you want to list in either the additional supports or professional referrals section of the plan. This means that the team wants to either be able to keep track of those who are currently providing professional services, or it's a place to list the need to find a professional to help meet a need. It is not required that medical professionals be listed in everyone's Ohio ISP, but we did want you to be aware that if you need to do this based on the person's unique situation, there is a place. When the person is not feeling well, what do they do? Consider who and how they would alert someone. This is especially important for people who either don't use words to communicate or people who tend to not tell you when they don't feel well. Share how they do communicate this to you and what it looks like. You may consider even popping back over into communication and adding the info to the communication chart if it makes sense to do that. Before we leave this set of questions, take a moment to consider whether there are any additional pieces of information you'll want to spend more time on in planning. Remember, assessment is where we work with the person and those who know them best to determine what they need and don't need. It's not until we get to planning that we figure out the how.
Continuing in the subsection of medical and dental care of the healthy living section. You see the first question on this slide asks, does the person take medication? If so, please explain. In Rose's example, the team chose to review certain medications that she takes and what she takes them for. It is not expected that all routine medications the person is taking be listed here. We know that medications are often changed and adjusted, and if we list all the medications in the assessment and plan, we could quickly and often find ourselves having to revise to keep that information current. Therefore, a list of all medications the person takes is better found using a physician's order form or medication administration record. These documents are updated routinely and show current medications. With that being said, while not all medications are necessary to be listed in the Ohio ISP, a person may have specific medications that are so important that they should be listed in their Ohio ISP. For example, any medications a person takes that have a specific medical protocol or any medication being used as a chemical restraint should be listed. This type of medication should be clearly defined with how and for what purpose the medications are to be administered. An example of medication to be sure to include could be a PRN seizure medication with the parameters of when and how the medication should be administered. Other examples could include an EpiPen or an insulin schedule. Then moving on, the next question, does the person need help with medication? We will review additional information regarding this question on the next slide because some guidance has recently been added. Further down on the slide, you see the 7 self-administration assessments are listed. This is a prompt in the Ohio ISP assessment to ensure that the appropriate self-administration assessments have been completed as needed. Remember that everyone is assumed to be able to self-administer their medications unless an assessment was completed indicating otherwise. We will review self-administration further when we get to the trending topics. As I said before, additional guidance was added to the assessment question asking if the person needs help with medication. The additional guidance was added to ensure that specific needs of the person in medication administration are being assessed and addressed. You want to consider the self-administration assessments that have been completed and what the results of those assessments told you regarding what support with medication administration the person needs. Here is where you will go into detail about the specific assistance or support that is needed for the person to complete safe, accurate medication administration. For example, under this question, you may address support that is needed to get refills of prescriptions, if they need reminders of when to take their medications, and/or if they use technology for medication, such as a pre-filled medication dispenser. Continuing in the healthy living section, we are now in the nutrition subsection. This is where you address whether the person follows any kind of diet or needs any special food. For example, does the person follow a diabetic diet, or have they been prescribed a specific diet texture due to swollen concerns? You will indicate that information here. In addition, you will want to go into further detail about whether or not the person agrees and wants to follow the recommendations. Then, in the next question, you explore what kinds of food the person typically likes to eat. The guidance suggests you consider different environments they may be in, and if that changes their preferences. And the final question in nutrition asks if the person requires support before, during, and/or after mealtime. Do they use any adaptive equipment to eat? Do they require extra assistance while eating or to cut up their food? Supervision needs and monitoring for choking? Explain it here if they utilize a G-tube for their nutrition as well. And finally, the last subsection in healthy living is wellness. This section asks questions related to the person's perception of a healthy lifestyle. Do they like to do something like walk or dance to stay healthy? As we see in our example, Rose's idea of being healthy is when her stomach doesn't hurt her. This is important to Rose. She also knows that drinking a lot of water helps with this. This section also asks about personal hygiene and self-care needs. We see that Rose likes to take her shower at night and washes her hair 1 time per week with a hot oil treatment twice per month. We see that she needs support to complete these tasks. This is also where you can cover other routines that the person may have in their day, such as watching their favorite talk show when they wake in the morning, or taking a soak in the bathtub to relax after a long day at work. The assessment also asks if the person wants to improve their healthcare habits. Do they want to learn yoga? Did they just find a significant other and need some additional information on birth control or preventing sexually transmitted infections? We see in this example that Rose loves nature and likes to go for walks. We also see that she sees a counselor on a weekly basis.
At the end of each assessment section, you will be asked to summarize what you've learned. This isn't just a copy and paste exercise. You may need to have some more conversation to be sure that you understood correctly. Some find it helpful to incorporate this part into their conversation as things come up during assessment. So for example, we learned earlier that Rose enjoys walks in the park and loves nature. Seems like it might be important to her. During assessment conversations, you can confirm this and make a note in the summary here so it doesn't get lost. You might learn more about this in another section too, but don't worry about duplication. You'll be able to remove that later if you need to. You may approach each of these areas in a similar way. It doesn't have to be perfect because again, you'll have a chance to clean it up later. This summary section could be considered your notes for planning, which brings us to the final part of this summary. You'll be asked about technology solutions that have been explored. Then you have an opportunity to note whether supports are needed and what type of support should be explored later. By checking one of these boxes, no support, paid support, natural support, etc., the online system will open a text box where you may leave some notes for yourself. Perhaps you learned that someone has a really serious allergy and you want to make sure it is incorporated into a paid support in the plan. Check paid support here, add the note about the allergy. Then when you get to planning, there will be a paid service already started for you that includes the note that you typed. Many people share that they are worried they will forget something. This is a great way to remind yourself later. So as we've discussed previously, the final part of the summary is the specialized tools. Specialized tools are tools that have been completed or may need to be completed. Listed here are examples of tools that may apply in this healthy living section. Have something that isn't listed here, just add it to the other option. Any tool that you decide makes sense to add here in this healthy living section, you'll be able to upload that later as an attachment.
Our first trending topic for this month is medication administration. As said before, all people have the inherent right to self-administer their medications. The purpose of this self-administration assessments are to ensure that the person is not able to safely accomplish medication administration and/or complete healthcare tasks prior to implementation of supports that could violate their right to self-administer medications and/or treatments. Prior to restriction of a person's right to self-administer medication or perform healthcare tasks, the appropriate DODD-approved self-administration assessment must be completed. These assessments are indicated within the Healthy Living section of the Ohio ISP. These assessments include general, oral, and topical medication, use of a glucometer, performance of health-related activities, inhaled medications, oxygen administration, and medication nutrition and fluids per G or J tube, and insulin metabolic glycemic disorder medications. It is recommended that the self-administration assessment be completed by a person who is familiar to the person being assessed and knows them well. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the SSA or QIDP to ensure that the self-administration assessment is completed. When possible, it is recommended that a second observer be present when completing the self-administration assessments as well. Remember, the assessment for self-administration of medications, nutritions, and fluids per G and J tube and the assessment for insulin metabolic glycemic disorder medications must be completed by a licensed nurse. If using the paper version of the Ohio ISP, you will attach the self-administration assessment to the document. If using DODD's Salesforce platform, the SSA or QIDP is responsible for inputting the information into the system. If someone other than the SSA or QIDP completes the assessment, they should provide the completed assessment to the SSA or QIDP, who can then enter the information in the system. Once the assessments are completed, it is imperative that the information gathered through the assessments are reflected in the Ohio ISP and align with the supports to assist the person in medication administration. These supports should be thoughtfully planned out by the team. Then our second trending topic is technology. As we said before, new additions regarding technology were prompted by the new technology first rule. These changes were seen throughout Rose's example as they were highlighted in blue. As we know, Ohio is a technology-first state, and thus technology should be continuously explored to support people. Be sure to list technology solutions that have been explored. Have you discussed if the person wants to use technology and what type of technology that may be? There is no standard technology assessment or mandated form. Discuss what options may be available for the person. Remember, you do not need to be an expert in technology, but should know where to find information. There are multiple resources that can be found on DODD's Technology First webpage. And a reminder, if a person is using remote supports, the remote support provider should be identified in the Ohio ISP along with the supports they're providing. Remember that a backup provider for the remote support should also be identified along with a protocol to follow should the individual request the remote support equipment be turned off. We are hopeful that these reminders and trending topics are helpful as you continue to work within the Ohio ISP.
So you have completed the healthy living section of the assessment. And we talk about the bridge from assessment to plan. And this is really it. Once you have the summary information listed for each assessment that's been completed, that information moves over into the planning part of OhioISP. We're just taking a quick sneak peek of that as we're going to go more into planning in our upcoming sessions. So if you remember earlier, we said that you'd be taking down notes in each of the summary areas of the assessment that you have explored with the person. That information will then move over to planning, and that is a great time just to confirm that you have what you need there. You could remove duplication if you found that you have duplication, and really just getting this cleaned up so that you can finish out the plan. Continuing with our sneak peek of what carries over from assessment into planning, remember where you added some information about a potential risk in the healthy living summary section? That information moves into this column that is titled, What is the risk? What does it look like? And where does it occur? Again, this is a great time to make sure that you've addressed this well. We've talked about duplication several times. I'm sure you know and have had the experience that there are risks that cross over all areas of a person's life. You may get to this point in that bridge from assessment to planning where you realize you've got the same risk listed multiple times. So you've got a risk for healthy living and you've got the same one listed for communication. That's okay. A decision can be made here about whether you need the risk several times or whether listing it once covers it. And what I mean by that is perhaps this risk has been listed for rows in several different assessment sections. You will want to determine if that risk requires different support based on different environments or situations. If it does, you may want to leave it listed more than once. If instead, the support is going to look the same across all environments, perhaps you want to combine the risk into one. So the next column, what support must look like, why the person needs this support, it's already filled out here, but just keep in mind that this will be blank when you finish assessment. You only have information listed in that what is the risk column. When it's time to work through this what support must look like, why the person needs this support, this is really that how that we talked about. How does this person need support in? This box must be clear and use easy to understand language. Imagine you are directly telling someone what they must do to support the person to be healthy and safe. What does it look like? Also, supervision is addressed here. And keep in mind that supervision should also be addressed later when you get to services and supports. You want to make sure that those responsible for providing support have access to that information and know what they need to be documenting. If you have any questions about supervision, please reference the video from our November gathering for further details. That's on our website. Finally, who is responsible? Keep in mind you may want to assign more than one provider to a risk. Again, support will likely look different for different providers, so be careful to not remove too much duplication. So I'm just going to say it once more. The risk may look the same. So that column that says, what is the risk? What does it look like? It may look the same. However, if support needs to look different based on the environment or who is providing the support, you may find you want to leave the risk listed multiple times. Okay, now we're moving into services and supports. We are showing you this section of the OhioISP because it relates to the information you collected in the Healthy Living Assessment section that we covered today. This is where you will list and describe what services and supports need to be completed, how often they should be completed, and how much is needed. Additionally, you'll call out who is going to provide that service and support. Each provider, if someone has more than one, will have their own services and supports section. So you'll notice here in Rose's example, because we're using this Word document, two different providers were listed here for the who is responsible at the top. In an online system, each of those providers will have their own separate section. That also allows for service documentation sheets to generate for each provider based on the services and supports that they have been authorized to provide. So remember earlier when I said that you could make a note of what paid supports might be needed. I used an example of someone has a serious allergy and you want to make sure that it gets over into the plan in the services section. This is where that note will show up, right here in the scope of service and what support looks like column. As with the other areas, you'll clean this up and make sure it thoroughly covers the support needed. You can add a frequency and a duration and you're good to go. And because many have asked, we recognize that multiple providers may be providing the same service and support. You will be able to copy these easily rather than having to retype each listing for each provider. You can also assign a different duration and frequency for each provider. And finally, I do want to call out that ICFs, of course, have one funding source, and the service will be ICF. So some of this may not seem relevant to you, but I do believe that copying the service listed doesn't have to be just for adding a different provider. It can be for adding another support that is similar, but you just want to change it slightly. Or maybe you want to separate what support in the morning looks like with support in the evening on a different row. Different frequencies, slightly different support. That's easily done. This is the next part of the services and support section in the ISP. And really what we want to call out here is we learned in Healthy Living that Rose has a mental health counselor that she sees once a week. And we also shared with you it might be a great idea to go ahead and jot that down if the team agrees they want to use the plan to keep track of this information. Again, it's not required that you list medical professionals in the Ohio ISP. That will be based on each individual situation. I also want to point out that we're not covering the professional referrals part of the ISP today because we don't have anything listed for Rose in the Healthy Living section around professional referrals.
So we have completed our walkthrough of the Healthy Living section and crossed the bridge into planning for Rose. We want to take this time to remind you of what you can do now to prepare for the Ohio ISP. Consider ways in which you can simplify your processes. Begin to dig deeper as you work with people to discover those things that are important to them. As you look at onboarding and implementing the Ohio ISP, begin to evaluate current processes and systems to ensure they align with the Ohio ISP. Please be sure that you continue to familiarize yourself with the Ohio ISP assessment questions and the flow. This will be of great assistance when you begin completing your initial plans. We want to take this time to remind you of the resources available on the website at dodd.ohio.gov/OhioISP. Here you will find the most current paper version of the Ohio ISP, which was last updated in December of 2021. In addition, several Ohio ISP example plans have been added to the site and more are in the works to be added, so please be sure to check back often. The Ohio ISP demo is listed on the welcome page of the Ohio ISP website, and this demo includes a welcome from former Director Davis, along with a demonstration of the IT system. In addition, we still have resources related to these 6 essential elements of person-centered planning, outcomes resources, trauma response information, the plain language guide for the Ohio ISP, the OSAS map, which will connect you with the right DODD contact in your area, guidance on the assessment and planning, communication facilitation tips given by the field, benefits of Ohio ISP Online, and frequently asked questions, which continue to be updated and expanded with questions from the field. Reminder that Ohio ISP questions, concerns, and other feedback can be sent directly to the Ohio ISP email at ohioisp@dodd.ohio.gov. Now that you have listened to the recording for the month, we encourage you to join other QIDPs and SSAs in your region to ask any questions you may have. DODD office hours for February are for Region 1 and 2, February 23rd from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., Region 3 and 4, February 24th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., and for Region 5 and 6, February 17th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Links to these team meetings can be found on the Ohio ISP webpage under Ohio ISP Support. In addition, be on the lookout for information regarding the March gatherings. We will review planning during these gatherings, and communications will be sent with additional information.
Thanks so much for joining us. As always, if you have questions, feel free to email us at ohioisp@dodd.ohio.gov. Have a great day.